All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Ethical Consumer Podcast. I'm your host, Julia, and joining me today is our guest, Julia, founder of Miakoda, a sustainable and ethical clothing company based out of New York. And I am actually wearing it right now. I am not an influencer. I'm not that person, but I do happen to love all of the clothes that she has designed and produced, and I'm excited to have you on.
Yay, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Most definitely. And we're not going to forget our names. So, Julia, your last name is Ahrens. My last name is Abbott. So, we even have the same initials, actually.
Julia A.
Julia A. There we go. Now, you started this company, Miakoda, with your sister, too. So, you are technically a co-founder of Miakoda.
Yes, that's correct. Laura doesn't really participate in the day-to-day,
Sure.
but she's more of like the, hey, family, I really want to start a brand. I'm straight out of college, and I don't know how I'm going to do this. And she was all about supporting me, giving me money to start it. And whenever I have like a question or need to bounce some ideas off someone, she's always open to listening and bouncing ideas and brainstorming. And she loves the creative process. And she's also an ethical and sustainable consumer. So it's like field research. I can just be like, hey, is this something you'd want? Does this sound good to you? And I mean, it's the same with me. So we can be like, yeah, that sounds good.
I love it. That's awesome. And it keeps it kind of in the family, too. Now, does she live in New York with you as well, or does she live in a different part of the U.S.?
She's moved to Boston. Well, now she's actually outside of Boston. Since when I first started Miakoda, we were both living in New York, and now she lives in Massachusetts. But she's been spending lots of time in New York because of the pandemic.
Sure, definitely. That has to be nice to have her around a little bit more frequently, maybe after.
It's amazing.
Oh, I love it. So good. Now, I'm going to ask you two questions because we do usually have food and beverage founder guests or people that work in the food and beverage industry on this podcast, but I like to delve out into other types of sustainability because to consider that the food and beverage industry is the only thing that we need to be paying attention to would just completely exclude so many other industries and areas where sustainability and ethical consumerism, if that is possible to exist, would need to be noted and cared about. So what is your favorite food or beverage? And then what is your favorite piece of clothing?
Okay. Well, my favorite beverage is here. It's Coastal Craft Kombucha.
Ooh.
It's a local to me, Long Island, woman-owned, craft brewed, Long Island local, vegan, recycle the can, never shake, keep refrigerated, la la la. I get them at my farmer's market that I walk to.
Nice.
So talk about sustainable. And they're local to me, and they're really awesome. And their kombucha is so good. Like, people who don't even like kombucha like their kombucha. And then, I don't know. I have to say my favorite clothing is Miakoda.
Well, duh. Do you have a favorite piece?
My favorite piece would have to be either, oh gosh, can I give you top three?
Oh, of course you can.
Okay, slouchy pants, high-waisted joggers, and Brahmi.
Love it. Yes, I am wearing the Brahmi right now in the maroon color from last year. And then I do have two pairs of the joggers, and I lived in them. I would still live in them if it were not 96 degrees in Iowa right now. So they've been retired for the summer.
96 degrees in New York, but...
And you're still rocking them. I love it.
I wore bike shorts to take my dog for a walk, but when I came back in, our apartment gets, not to anyone else, but by my standards, it's cold, so
Sure.
I put on joggers.
I love it. I do have a pair of bike shorts on the way, so I will have the bike shorts for summer. I will be able to wear Miakoda bottoms while it's 96 degrees outside, so I'm
Yay!
stoked.
I hope you love them.
I'm sure I will. The fabric, guys, not to do a commercial, but it is the softest, most breathable, comfy fabric. Like, every single piece I have absolutely loved. And part of that is because you only use plant-based materials with just a touch of spandex for comfy stretch. And that is one of Miakoda's pillars of being sustainable and being ethical in manufacturing and consumption. Now, when you set out to create a clothing company, did you start with the idea of sustainable fibers, or did you kind of work your way in there?
It was an interesting progression. So one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to start a company was because I wanted to have vegan options, and I found wool and silk being mixed into everything. what happened was after I graduated from college, my parents took me to London and Paris for my graduation, which was incredible. And they said, while you're here, you can pick one piece of clothing to buy, like a nice designer piece of clothing. And I couldn't find anything. I mean, like everything was, my parents were always like, no polyester. Like polyester is like the devil's fabric, which I never really understood. But now obviously I do. But so I was looking and everything was polyester, silk, wool, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I want a vegan clothing company because everyone who's like on the same path as I am is going to want this too. And then I really started doing some more research and I was like, first, I was obviously going to produce in the USA just because as a small brand, it's easier. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what's the pros to this? And I found out all the ethical and everything that goes along with that. And I was like, why in the world would I produce in a sweatshop that's so counterintuitive to everything I want to do with my life? And then at the same time, I was trying to eat more organic and local and plant-based, blah, blah, blah food. And I was like, if I want all of this in my food, why, besides benefiting me, like, how is this benefiting the planet? And why should I also do this with my clothing? So it's kind of like a weird, like, if you're going to do it, you might just do it all right. Like, there's no, like, half in, like, oh, this is a vegan, ethically made, but we use polyester. Unless, like, you're a swimwear brand and you're using, like, recycled polyester for swim because you kind of need that. But, that's sort of just.
I love it. That's a wonderful story. So did you graduate from design school? Did you do fashion design or fashion merchandising, something of that nature?
Yeah, I did fashion design. I went to Parsons, and in my senior year, I specialized in knitwear, which is funny because I was actually really big into crocheting, and my first job in the fashion industry was crocheting runway pieces for Zac Posen.
Holy cow.
And then I did accessories, and my senior year, my thesis was knitwear, like crochet and knit and machine knit and also cut and sew knit, and everything I make for Miakoda is a cut and sew knit. I just think it's so much more comfy and like, I don't know, everything I have that's like a woven, like stiff fabric, even like I love linen, but even that, like when you first put it on, it's not immediately comfy. You kind of have to break it in a little bit. And I like that immediate gratification.
Yes, I agree. I have a pair of hemp pants from Prana and I love them, but I didn't love them for like the first 2 years that I owned them. It wasn't comfortable. It was kind of crunchy. Like you said, it's like the linen woven. Eventually it's your favorite piece, but right off the bat, yeah, it takes some breaking in, which is not nearly as fun.
Definitely. I mean, it's worth it. Like, it's slow gratification. And, like, I find linen, hemp, and fibers like that are amazing after you've washed them a few times and you've worn them and you broke them in and you stretch out the fiber a little bit. But I want to be able to, like, get something out of the package, throw it on, and be like, wow, I'm so comfy.
Yes, agreed. So did you want to be a designer for the majority of your childhood, or was this something you happened upon a little later?
I was always that child who was like, they'd be like, oh, do you want to play hide and seek? Do you want to play tag? Do you want to play like any games? Do you want to play a board game? And I'd be like, what's the point? There's nothing that you get out of it. I was like the strangest child.
I love it.
I was like, I want to do arts and crafts because at the end I'll have something to show for it.
Yes.
And then I started to be like, how many paintings or like pictures am I going to hang around my mother's house that are hideous? Like, I want to do something that I can use.
Sure.
Like, I want it to be functional. So I want it to be art, but I want it to be functional, and I want it to have a purpose. And then I started, my grandmother taught me how to knit and how to spin wool, which as a vegan I don't do anymore.
Sure.
But I used to spin wool. She would dye it with plant-based dyes, and we'd do all sorts of things. She was really cool. So I had a spinning wheel when I was, like, 7 years old.
I love that.
We used to bead, and we would go to like local bead stores and bead and gem and crystal expos and buy like all this stuff. And she made amazing jewelry. I made mediocre jewelry, but ever since then I wanted to make stuff that you could wear and that had like purpose. And so I guess, yeah, it's kind of fun. I mean, there are other jobs. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a vet. When I was in first grade, I made like a cube that said like, my name's Julia, this is what I want to be, and it said artist. So I kind of always vet, helping animals. Astronaut doesn't fit in anywhere. Artist, designer, I don't know.
Unless you wanted to design, like, I don't know, our space suits vegan and of sustainable material, I'm kind of guessing perhaps not. But maybe there's a niche further down. Is Miakoda? Ooh, tell us about the name, because there's your astronaut reference.
Power of the Moon.
There you go. There you
Miakoda
go.
meets Power of the Moon, for anyone who's like not getting our inside joke here. But I'm all about it. Totally. I get the inspiration, the astronaut theme turned into the inspiration for the name for Miakoda. There we go.
There we go. Oh, too fun. Now, when you were in school, was sustainable production or sustainable manufacturing, well, I guess production and manufacturing, textiles, pardon me. So we have the textile process, making sustainable fabrics, and then also making the garments. Were those talked about much in the program that you went through, or was that kind of dig deeper on your own?
Right now, Parsons has, I wish I was back in college now, because it has so many really cool sustainable initiatives, like sustainable classes, sustainably focused everything. And there were people doing it. I think there were different sections for your senior thesis. Each class had about 16 to 18 kids in it. It was a really small school and a really small program, but you could choose, like, do you want to be a knitwear focus? You want to be a children's wear focus? You want, I don't even, what else was there? Children's wear, knitwear, not knitwear, like regular, evening wear, bridal, stuff like that. So I was in the knitwear focus, and I think there might have been a sustainability focused one, but honestly, like, when I was first going into my senior year, it wasn't something I thought about. So I probably was like, what's that? Okay, next.
Sure.
I'm thinking now. But when I went into working on my senior thesis actually fueled Miakoda, and pieces like slouchy pants were part of my senior thesis. So that was my first ever Miakoda piece. But I actually made my entire senior thesis organic, sustainable, ethical, all that stuff. And the first factory I ever worked with for Miakoda, I had to do some of the pieces for my senior thesis. You have to for your senior thesis, you have to make, I think it was like 80 or 90% of it, but like people who are doing evening wear, they could send out their beading. And there's this one pair of pants that I was working on that just, like, I could not sew it. I don't know why. They just kept coming out horrible. So they told me I could give it to a factory to make them for me.
Nice.
But I actually, when the first day of senior year, we all had to come in with our inspiration books and explain what we're doing for our thesis. And I was like, everything's going to be sustainably done, organic cotton, blah, blah, blah. And everyone looked at me like I was a weirdo. I was already that girl, like, bringing my yoga mat to class, wearing yoga clothes, and then drinking my green smoothie. And everyone was like, you paid how much money for that green gook? I was a weirdo. I mean, which is funny, because coming from fashion school, if you're wearing like 10-inch heels and like a leopard print head to toe big hat, you're not weird. You're drinking that green smoothie, you're a weirdo.
Sure. Oh, totally. It's a totally different world, I would imagine. I would equate myself to have been one of the weirdos as well. And in Cedar Falls, Iowa, definitely a smaller town. Is Parsons in New York City?
Yes, it's in New York City.
Okay, so
actually, fun fact, where Project Runway is filmed.
Really? Did not know this. Oh, cool. I did. I watched that show religiously when was that out? It might have been college. I think it might have been college, maybe a little bit of high school too, but I did love that show.
When I was in high school, I watched it like religiously, and by the time I got to Parsons and saw what havoc having this filming crew in our space was, I was like, I hate this show.
Oh no.
It's a great show. And Tim Gunn, who is on Project Runway, used to be the head of the program, but obviously with Project Runway, we had a new head by the time I was in school.
Sure. That's fair. So you would say that at Parsons and perhaps at other colleges as well, or is that an independent design school, or do you consider that to be it's not a state university, is that correct?
No, it's not. It's part of a bigger school. It's part of the new school, which has like Eugene Lang and jazz studies and like a bunch of other schools. But Parsons is the design school in the new school.
Okay, I hear you. Would you say that it's starting to become more common for schools to teach aspects of sustainability, or would you say Parsons is kind of on the cutting edge with that?
I think more schools are. I think it's really important, and I think that they're realizing it. And I think that for new designers to get jobs, they really have to have some sort of like knowledge of sustainability and of all of that. So I haven't kept up with it, but I know the 3 big schools I wanted to go to were Pratt, FIT, and Parsons, and they're all in New York City. And I think they're all, I don't know if it's a New York thing or a design school thing or like an art thing, but I think they're all stepping up their game in terms of sustainability.
Sure. Awesome. Now, we've thrown that word around a lot, the word sustainability. And it's one, I mean, I think there's one definition for most, but there's also like sustainability means something to each person. What does sustainability mean to you?
I think the biggest thing sustainability means, how can I say this without using the word sustainable?
Right.
It's something that is something that's sustainable. I'm kidding. Sustainability is something that can be done long term without, for me, hurting people, the planet, and animals. Because if you're hurting part of that trifecta, it can't sustain itself. It can't keep going. And especially with our planet as like the main focus and its inhabitants, it's just, if you're hurting our resources, we can't keep going. There's just no way. So for me, sustainability, especially with my company and when I'm making decisions, it's always, is this something that I could still be doing in so many years and without hurting people, animals, and the planet?
Got you. So when you're going through your selection process, when was Miakoda founded? Is this
2013?
2013. Okay. I wanted to say I did look up that beforehand and then I forgot to write it down. So we're coming up on the 10-year mark in just 2 short years here, which will be super exciting.
Oh my God.
Hi, oopsies. Yes. What are some of the things that you look for in sourcing your fabric?
So I work with 2 main suppliers, and it's really hard to find suppliers that are also ethically minded, where they're actually paying their workers a fair wage. Like, there are so many companies that make like organic cotton. I mean, think about it. H&M has an organic cotton line. Does that mean it's ethical? Like, 100% no. If anyone listens to this podcast and wants to get a message from me, fast fashion, quote, sustainable lines are not sustainable because it's fast fashion, and fast fashion will never be sustainable because it is fast. But so there are tons of companies that do that. So for me, I work with 2 suppliers that I found and have found their fabrics to be high quality, and they are ethically minded and sustainably focused. And I'd love to see more options, and I keep seeing more and more options. For example, the bike shorts are the same fabric as our active Brahmi material and our high-waisted leggings. And for years, people have been asking me, make it in more colors, make it in more colors. I'm like, I would if I could, but I can't. Like, it only comes in black. So I kept saying to the fabric supplier, like, I will be your first customer if you make this in more colors. And they asked me what color I wanted to see. I was like, green. And they chose the gray color, and the blue-gray color. It's not really gray. It's more like a blue-gray. But I like hopped all over that, and everyone is so pumped to see that I have more colors. But it's definitely, it's been years of asking. So there's definitely like getting colors in sustainable materials is really difficult. A lot of the times they'll have like undyed material and you can get it dyed yourself. I did that once. It's extremely expensive and no one wants to pay for it.
Ooh, sure. That would be, you really limited as far as what suppliers are offering. Like you said, you have 2 companies that you work with and you've been asking for more colors, but they just had black. You've really only had the single option. And what you did in asking more, perhaps now they will start to come out with even more colors as long as they know that you are able to buy them. And then perhaps other companies will want to incorporate more colors and more sustainable fabrics too. So you've kind of started this chain of improving not only the supply chain, another chain, but just options for other companies out there too, not just Miakoda. It takes someone asking and wanting that enough for the supplier to warrant thinking that, hey, maybe we should actually do this, or make it possible for them financially to do it.
and I totally hope, I mean, I bought a bunch of it, and I've planned more production for 2022 with these fabrics. So I've already pre-ordered like another like bunch of yards. But I sent them an email. I was like, I hope you're getting positive feedback from everyone else, because my customers are really happy.
Yeah, definitely. Now, what does an order look like for you then? So do you contact your supplier and say, I would like to make X number of pieces. It takes about this much square footage to make a garment. Are you willing to make this for me? Or do you just kind of have to go by what they have available? You said you already ordered a significant amount of fabric already. Will they have that fabric on hand when you run out, or is that a risk that you run when it's kind of a specific, almost maybe a trial fabric?
Well, that's why I did it now. I'm not going to be making this until I'm having them ship it the first week of January, and I let them know the yardage I want now, so that they just made a bunch of yards. I don't know how many they made, but usually when I talk to my fabric mills, they bring in like maybe 1,000 or 2,000 yards of fabric. I typically order between 100 and 300 yards of any given color, because we do small batches, so it's not like a huge amount. It's huge from where I started. To me, that seems huge still, yeah. It's definitely really small. Like, that's why I feel bad, and like I don't have huge power to like make them make the things I want, because I'm not making huge batches. I'm not like a huge department store. I don't wholesale, so like there's not that pull for me, like, oh, we need that order. Like, we need to get Miakoda's order. But, so what I do is, like, I'm already working. I have all my production planned through January 2022. And right now I'm starting to work on styles for spring. You saw on my Instagram, I was asking all these questions, and I have some ideas of what I want to make. The problem is I'm always like, oh, I'll start working on samples, blah, blah, blah. And somehow it's like 2 months away from when I need to be putting this stuff out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have anything ready. So typically the fashion industry works in advance. So I've pre-ordered all my fabric through January. And in the next couple of months, I'll start working on my fabric. So what that looks like is getting samples made. Then I send the pattern to a company that grades them, which means makes them into different sizes. If I haven't already tested this style or a style that the pattern was based on plus size, I get a plus size sample made, which is my new thing because we've expanded our size range. So it's a big deal for us. So I then test usually a 4X, and then I grade down for the 3X just to make sure it fits our biggest size that we offer. And then I have them tell me how much yardage each garment makes. Then I place a pre-order for the fabric, and then when the fabric ships, it goes to my factory. I give them the marker, which are the graded sizes of the patterns, all in like this big, like huge piece of paper. And the fabric goes to them, and I give them the sample and the trims and the tags and all that and the packing materials, and they make everything for me.
Oh my goodness. So what you're telling me is there's a lot of math involved, and everybody has to be on board at the same time, but then there's still like a hierarchy of figuring things out from the top down.
The math is the hardest part for me. I was really good at math until I wasn't, and I hated math so much. I haven't taken a math class since I was 16, and I'm turning 31 next week.
How did you get away with that? I had to take a math. Well, okay, so you went to design school, and I went to a state school, so I had to take math, and you didn't have to take math.
Yeah, no, I had to take English, which was fine because in high school I thought it would be fun to take like advanced placement college English classes. So I actually placed out of most of them because I already had college credits because I was a nerd.
Yes.
But I had to take like design history and these like, we had to take a few like university classes, but one of mine was like New York, the dynamic metropolis, like weird stuff, nothing normal, no math.
Oh my goodness. I would have been right with you with the advanced placement English classes, but yeah, no, not in math. No, thank you. That
Definitely
is not.
My jam. Not my thing.
So aside from the math and then just making sure you have enough fabric for the sizes, for how much fabric it takes to make every single size, and enough to run a full production line. What are some other challenges that you find? Like in the past year, of course, we've been in a pandemic, and New York was really at the heart of that. Do you find supply and demand snags frequently, or has just the past year been an entire exception? Just in how awful it must have been, I would assume,
Oh
for
my
your supply
God.
and demand, and everybody involved on this planet.
Last year was absolutely crazy. Our factory is making PPE for 3 months after I had shipped all the fabrics to them and they had cut everything to make my spring summer pieces. So for 3 months I had nothing new, which is good in terms of sustainability, but I was sold out of almost everything. And I was like, dude, I gotta do something. So I was trying to be really inventive with like ways to like make stuff, and I like was finding fabric in my office, which was I was living in my mom's house at the time, so it was great because it was in her basement. That's I work out of her house, which is such a blessing. So every time I go to work, I get to see my cats and dogs. So I was trying to be really inventive with like I was making headbands and face cloths and scrunchies and everything out of her basement. And it was just a very difficult time. And everyone kept asking when I was going to have new stuff. And I don't think a lot of the world wasn't as bad as New York was at that time. So I was like, I like can't even go to a supermarket without like a hazmat suit. Like it was really bad. I didn't leave my house for like 52 days just because I was so freaked out. So like it was just crazy. But then after that, my factory said to me, I think there's going to be a huge fabric shortage with how many people got backed up. Order all your fabric now. And I'm glad I listened to him and I ordered all my fabric so I wouldn't have to deal with any sorts of shortages. But fabric shortages are like, especially like with suppliers or having fabric on hand for when you need them. I've run into so many roadblocks. Like for the French terry joggers, I was originally going to make them in fleece. And I placed the order and they wrote back and I think I was placing the order in like August and I wanted to put them out in like the end of September, maybe middle of October, latest November. And they said, this fabric will be back in February. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? And I sampled everything in the fleece and I loved the fleece. It actually was a blessing in disguise. And that's why I always roll with the punches and just trust that the earth is leading me in the path I need to be, because so many of our customers are in California and what are they going to do with a fleece jogger?
Sure. Well, and the terry ones are they're warm, but they're light at the same time. Like you're wearing yours right now. I am not wearing mine right now, but they're so insulated and warm, but also so breathable that it's not. I feel like fleece sometimes, though, that would be magical in the Iowa winter and New York winter. Fleece sometimes, though, it's so soft and fuzzy. It can get too warm really fast.
Yeah,
maybe that's just me.
It's funny because I made fleece sweatshirts instead, and I changed the colors that I was going to use because they were like, we have enough to ship for like this much yardage, but I had like style on style on style. One of our sustainable decisions is to pick like the fabric you want to use and use it for multiple styles, because then you eliminate waste and you can order more of one thing instead of like just picking and choosing. So I was like, okay, so I guess I'll do the sweatshirt in fleece, and it was actually so hard to sell.
Oh no.
So I was like, I mean, I sold out of them eventually, but like it was a tricky sell, and it's funny because to this day I get so many requests for fleece and I'm like, never again.
I tried,
it didn't work out. The earth was trying to be like, no, Julia, don't do that. But it is very, I think I actually sold during COVID when I was like, how in the world am I going to make any money? I sold all the samples from our office. Every time you do when you do photo shoots, or when like you lend clothing to someone for a photo shoot, or when you're doing production or anything that comes back flawed, I would just throw it on a garment rack and it started to look like so messy. And it just looked horrible. And I like organized all of it. I was like, wow, there's a lot here. And I sold all of it for like really super discounted prices. So I think someone out there, I don't remember who, got the fleece jogger. So I hope they're enjoying them because they're one of a kind.
There you go. Just one. You just had a single sample mocked up, or
I had
couple?
A single sample.
Single sample. Man, oh goodness. Now, when you're talking about the photo shoots and having models wear them and having like rented or borrowed for a photo shoot, usually what would you end up doing, or what did you do? You just told me. What would end up happening to those garments? Because they're not usually sold, or maybe they're sold as seconds or pre-worn or pre-loved, but where does so much of our clothing end up?
So for me, what I do now, especially with COVID, and like I'm not sanitizing those, I'm not like it's a lot, especially with having multiple size models and shooting multiple garments. Now what I do is I give the clothing to the models, and they're always so excited. You'd be shocked. No one gives clothing to models. You think like, oh, you get to wear all this beautiful clothes. Don't you have so much beautiful clothes? There are like no companies. Every time I tell the models, like, oh, you can keep that. They're like, oh, I can keep that? Like as if I just told them they won the lotto. It's so cute.
I just thought that was a thing. I just assumed that once you've modeled that I don't know, maybe that was wishful thinking on my part, but like, oh.
Totally wishful. I think it's wishful for the models too, but they get so excited and like, it's just fun. But I think for the past like 2 years, I've given all the clothing. Like it used to be that I had to then take those. What I used to do is I would have the models shoot the clothing, and then I would send the clothing to another photographer who would take like the flat images, which you see on our main home screen where there's a picture of the clothing without any body in it. But what I do now is I send a production piece to the photographer to take those samples, or I have the photographer take them on set before. But it's actually really difficult. So some pieces we do that, but like some pieces require a lot of styling and all specific things that I've tried to do myself, and you need to be like a mastered photographer to do.
Sure.
But so that's why I didn't give the clothing to the models, because I needed it to get photographed again. And I ended up putting all that clothing on a rack and selling it as pre-loved. But I have a feeling, I don't know specifically, but I have a feeling a lot of stuff just ends up in landfill and in the trash.
Sure.
Unfortunately,
Sorry, go ahead.
One of the things that really turned me off to the traditional fashion industry is one of the companies I worked for. They set up an entire runway show. They had all the clothing made. The designer came and looked at it, said, no, this is trash. And that's exactly what they did with it. They threw it all in the trash. And I felt so upset. This was like before I was into yoga and veganism and sustainability or anything. Like I was just like literally like a fashion obsessed teenager. And I was so distraught. And that was one of the things that got me thinking about my sustainability journey. I was like, why does this bother me so much? It's so wasteful.
Sure. Well, definitely. You would hope, here's my wishful thinking again, you would hope that those pieces would find alternative homes, or maybe they'd get stored and there's going to be a fashion museum where they can go in someday and like as a time capsule sort of piece. But no, I suppose that's unfortunately not the case. And I don't remember the number, but there's a staggering amount of clothing that just ends up in landfills. And as so much of our clothing is made from your parents' least favorite fabric, polyester, it's plastic. Essentially, we're putting more plastic in our landfills by having all of this polyester clothing and tossing it out when fast fashion is no longer in style. And it's a huge problem. Miakoda is not the problem. Miakoda is solving the problem. But in general,
I'm trying.
Yes.
No, I totally. One of the things that I learned actually not too long ago. I learned it on Instagram. Is that most fast fashion. I can't even say it. It's like a curse word in my language. Fast fashion retailers, when you return something and I was notorious for this, like. One of my school buildings was on Fifth Avenue in New York City, so I would go to H&M and Zara and like all those places, and I would buy so much stuff without trying it on, go home, try it on, and return half of it. Mm-hmm. They take those returns and throw them out.
Ooh.
They don't even, and I know when I get returns, like sometimes I get back a Brahmi with like deodorant on it, and I can't sell that again, or I will have it dry cleaned or whatever and use it for a photo shoot. But, like, I'll never hold that against the consumer because it's impossible to try on a Brahmi without getting deodorant on it. Like, I don't know how I ever get returns, but, like, I have to clean and disinfect and then refold, repackage, put it away, and resell it so that it's just as good as you're getting a brand new piece of clothing. And it takes time. So, most fast fashion retailers don't want to be bothered. They're like, oh, this came back. And even if it looks perfect, they don't want to have to check.
Sure. No, I hear you. That with the fast fashion specifically, you're talking about like people that come out with a new collection every like couple weeks or every month, things that are turning products around, seeing something in the fashion magazine or on Fashion Week, and then somehow magically they just have a complete line, well, not a complete line of sizes, and we'll get to that later too, a complete line. So they think of sizes and colors and designs like a week later, which is just not, you just can't, you can't look at that and think that that's being done in a sustainable way. That's just not possible.
Yeah, an ethical way. Like, how in the world are you getting this turned out?
No, not not with the hours that the workers have to be putting in. Definitely not with how much they're paid. And yeah, it's just messy. It's just messy.
It's so crazy, and it's actually, just for comparison, let's say bike shorts. Let me give you an accurate. I gave my bike shorts to the factory. Mm-hmm. I just released them, last week?
I think so.
I gave them to the factory 3.5 months ago to make.
Wow. So 3.5. So how long did your design and the size grading and things like that, like since the bike shorts are your most recent piece, from concept to really starting the design and the sizing and the fabric order, how long did that take? You said you were already starting to plan pieces for 2022.
Let's see if I have it in here.
Ooh.
I might not have it in here. Let's see. La la la. Give me 1 minute.
No worries. I have always wondered that. I think the bike shorts came out maybe 2 weeks ago or so, because I did love that green, girl. Loved that green.
Oh, yeah, and the green. I love that green. I had to, before I even put them out, I had to feel them for myself.
Yes, I did not jump on the green fast enough.
I'll be making them again, definitely. A bike short sample. This was October 2020.
Wow. Okay. So in the midst of pandemic and kind of when New York was literally starting to be able to breathe again was when the bike shorts started to come into fruition. And they just released 2 weeks ago. We're recording this the second week of June. So October to May is what we're looking at for that time. Yeah. Fashion Week comes out and then you have...
Bike shorts were easy. Yeah. Bike shorts were easy. They were one of the shorter pieces to do everything for, because they're based on the high-waisted leggings. They're the same fit, just cropped off, and I just wanted to make sure they weren't going to squeeze my thighs. So that was all I had to worry about.
Yes, I have thighs. I appreciate them not being squeezed. I'm excited.
It's very uncomfortable. No one wants to have a seam digging into your thigh where you're ripping at it. No, we're not here for that.
No, please.
But
no,
yeah, it's crazy. We started that in October, just the design process, and I had to wait for the fabric to ship. I don't know how these fast fashion people do it, but it's impressive in all the worst ways.
I was going to say, I kind of don't want to know or think about it because it will make me sad. But when I do think about it, it makes me want to support ethical companies even more. So, I mean, you suppose you have that combination. It's this is awful. This is why I do it this way instead. Oh. Man, goodness gracious. So you're the company that makes, or the manufacturing facility that does all of your products, that is based in New York City, and you have a direct relationship with them. You are not mailing your garments to China to get made and back to the U.S. So one, you're saving on shipping and not polluting with more fossil fuels. But is this one of the first manufacturing companies that you started to work with, or is this a recent relationship?
I've been working with them for, I would say, about 4 years. I worked with another company. So the factory I work with now is in the Bronx, which is great because I can park really strangely on the street and never get tickets.
Nice.
Or they have a loading dock and I can park there. So my first factory was in Manhattan, and they were great, but they were extremely expensive. There was no way for me to sell anything under $100. And then when I and I understand I was doing very small production rounds. So when people don't usually know, but when everything's done in an assembly line sort of way, this person does this person does this, and the cutting phase is what takes a lot of time. So if you're cutting 20 pieces, which is what I started with, it's like very expensive and very time consuming. You're using a lot of labor to produce very little. So the cost is really expensive. And then the fabric is expensive because as you order more fabric, the price goes down per yard. And usually those price breaks are at like sometimes 50 yards, but usually 100 yards, sometimes 250 yards, but more often 500 yards. Like they really want you to buy more because it's like, especially with harvesting crops and dyeing colors and stuff, it's more cost effective for them to make more. And that's one of the reasons that we pick one like we don't make like, well, the bike shorts are a different material, but we don't make like slouch for our next production run. We're doing wrap crop tops that you were wearing and slouchy pants. Yes. So we're doing the same color wrap crop tops as we're doing slouchy pants, as opposed to picking two different colors because it's not I try to be mindful of what's cost effective and worthwhile for the fabric supplier too, and for them to meet the demand in a sustainable way.
Sure.
So, what was I talking about? I could just ramble on in all different directions for days.
Oh, I love it. This is stuff that we don't get to hear or be aware of because we are buying the clothes. We're not making the clothes, and we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. Oh, the price, the cost, the original place that you worked with in Manhattan because you had such small numbers. Yeah.
So it was extremely expensive, and one of the best things about growing Miakoda, although we definitely are not a cheap brand, I have dropped the prices so significantly since starting 8 years ago. I think like slouchy pants are now $85, but when we started, I think they were 100 and maybe like 160.
Sure.
So that was like a huge deal to me. Because I wanted to be more accessible, and although ethical and sustainable fashion is inherently more expensive, I want it to be as accessible as possible because people have this idea that if you're paying for something like designer pieces, like if you go to like Fendi and buy something that's like, oh, it must be ethical because it's expensive. It's like, no, that brand is profiting. Most of the amount of like where our money is distributed, most of it goes to fabric and labor, and then I just try to make money.
Yeah, there you go.
And also, but that goes along with paying models and influencers and the whole 9 yards. But so I worked with that factory in Manhattan, and I really loved them, but it was just impossible to grow Miakoda while working with them.
Sure.
So then I moved to another factory in Brooklyn, and I thought their quality was impeccable. But they were like kind of shady, and they would increase my prices mid-production round, and then like it was just weird. So one day I just went in there and I was like, I need to do, I have no ability to be like, hey, what you did was messed up, and I don't like that. And then like there's also a really big language barrier, as there is in many factories. So like I couldn't ask them questions about like their labor and all that stuff, and I really wanted to know more, and I just wasn't getting the answers. And although it was a gorgeous factory and everyone looked really happy, I wanted to be able to ask those questions.
Sure.
So I one day went in, I said, I have to pick up all my fabric, and I just took it all in I was driving like a small car, I like shoved it in there, could hardly see out my windows, and like drove home with it all. And then on my mission to find a new factory, I wanted to find someone that was cost effective so we could drop our prices, but also good quality and good labor and ethics. So when I went to this factory, there's a website, Makers Row, where you can pay for a subscription as a manufacturer or a supplier or a brand, and you can find like it's like pretty much like a resource for all different factories. And I met with so many factories. One of them that ended up being sued as a scam for like claiming to be all these things that they weren't, but they were just like ridiculous. And I like from the get-go, like when you're talking to these people, you can get like that gut reaction. One of the biggest things I've learned in business is like trust that gut reaction.
Sure.
But when I went and I met with a bunch of factories, and they had really like they were giving me good pricing, and their quality looked really great, and they were answering all the questions about their workers that like made me feel happy. But when I went in to meet with this factory, the owner, Eric, it was empty. It was just Eric in the factory. And I was like, it's like a warehouse space in the Bronx. It's not luxurious. It's not like Instagrammable, but like no one was there. It was empty. and it was 3:30, and I said, "Where is everybody?" And he goes, "They have kids." And I was like, "I love you."
Oh my gosh.
It was like they like to come in early after they drop their kids at school, and then they get home so they can pick them up after school. I'm like, yeah, they have the option to work overtime, but like I've gone there at like 5:00, and they're all saying goodbye. Some people are still working, but usually if you go there after 3:00, it's mostly empty. And if you want to work overtime, you have the option, but by no means are you being held there.
Wow. I got like emotional. That was his response.
Oh.
And to your, like, I mean, for that to be his response too, clearly he cares, and he's not running a slave labor operation, which very much still exists. And
Oh, yeah.
oh
And
man.
you don't think it exists in the United States, but they're like Forever 21 does some production in California. Let me tell you, they're not paying them above minimum wage.
Oh,
And like
gosh.
Eric, like minimum wage just went up in New York, so everyone, I think maybe, I can't remember. COVID really threw my mind out. I don't remember if this was a year ago or 2 years ago.
That's okay.
But minimum wage went up, and everyone in his factory is paid on the books. Like he runs payroll. There's no like under the table sketchy stuff. And he, which unfortunately sometimes he struggles to get people who want to work for him because they want the under the table stuff. But he's like, no, we are going by the books here.
Sure.
And he said to me like, hey, listen, I have to raise your prices because I have to pay the workers more. So like, I hope you understand. And I was like, oh yeah, no, totally fine. Thank you. But he's the best. I'm obsessed with him. And I've referred my friends who are designers to do their production there. And everyone's always thrilled with the quality, the ethics, the everything. And I tell him I'm the president of the Eric fan club.
There you go. Oh, I love it. Oh, that's so cool to know. This is such an amazing insight because this is just something that, perhaps we think about it, or unfortunately we think about it for like 5 seconds or 10 minutes, or maybe even 10 minutes and do a deep dive on Google, like, does slave labor still exist? What does Forever 21 pay their garment makers? And then unfortunately, it's really easy to be out of sight, out of mind. And I would say your maybe average consumer even still will go to the store, and then you see a sale, and then you get really excited because there's a sale and there's this really affordable piece and it's really cute and it's perfect for summer, and then you buy it, and then you get home and then you think, why was that so inexpensive? Why was it so inexpensive in comparison to more ethical brands right away before it was even on sale? Like, it's the chasing of the new and the flashy and the patterns and all of that stuff, but we really get sucked in, and it's easy to find out about how corrupt the fashion industry is, and then unfortunately forget about it for a little while, and then you remember again, and hopefully it gets ingrained eventually. But stories like this, and hearing just even that, thinking about the place that your clothes are actually being made, and having those examples is extremely eye-opening. Almost kind of like burns an emotion in my brain associated to thinking about that. Oh,
it's definitely a learning process, and I totally agree with you. It's one of those things where it's like the more you shop ethically and sustainably, the more it gets like put into your brain like, oh, this is the morals and values I want to align with, because don't tell anyone. I know we're recording this for the public, but when I first started Miakoda, I was still shopping at H&M and Forever 21.
Sure.
I didn't like understand, and it wasn't until the Rana Plaza factory collapsed in Bangladesh that was like really brought into the forefront. And like I was doing ethical production, but I didn't really understand like the questions to ask my factories, and like those factories were all good, and like they definitely weren't sweatshops. Like they were safe, they were clean, like no one's being held there against their will. Like the owners of the factories were not abusive. And like these are like very common practices in sweatshops, especially overseas, but it still happens in the United States and in Europe and in the places that you think like, oh, that doesn't happen there.
Sure.
But I still didn't fully understand it, and like especially with wanting like vegan shoes, I'd be like, oh, I'll go to Forever 21. They're so cheap, they don't use leather. And I'm like, yeah, true, and I mean, it's funny because to this day I have Old Navy sandals that everyone asks me, oh my God, where did you get those? I'm like, they are like 9 years old and I got them at Old Navy. Don't judge me. But the great thing about it is that now, even if you want to buy fast fashion, you can go on places like Poshmark and like your local thrift store and all that stuff and get those fast fashion pieces in a sustainable way, because there are so many people who are shopping fast fashion and just donating it, sticking it up on Poshmark or throwing it out. And like, you can buy it sustainably by buying it secondhand.
Sure.
So very frequently I'm like, oh, that's cute, I want those sneakers, and I search them on Poshmark and I'm like, great, I got them.
There you go.
Or I'm like, oh, they're not on Poshmark, guess I can't have them.
And you do this a lot on the Instagram stories, mostly on the Miakoda mood board account on Instagram. You will show your ethical outfit of the day. And sometimes it's your pieces, sometimes it's your friend's pieces, and a lot of times it's Poshmarked or thrifted or I've had this forever. And it's a really great example. Like, you are in the fashion industry. You are a designer and you are supporting the slow fashion, not only by having your own company, but just what you wear too. It's okay that you still shopped at H&M back in the day when you started. It's one of those things. I love that transparency too, by the way, though, because I feel like people would think that, this is your platform, this is your brand, this is your match. It's like, oh, she must be absolutely perfect and she never does anything incorrectly. Whew, y'all. But, it's when that was your exposure too, perhaps you had seen other factories in New York City as well, but working with your more sustainable, ethically produced factories and your textiles and things like that, if that's the image that you have, that's just the image that your brain goes to. And so
and
you think of
I think it's also education. Like, when I first started, I was 22. I guess I was 22 when I started Miakoda. Looking back on it now, I don't know if it's just as I age, I'm like, oh my God, I was so young. I thought I was so old. I thought I knew everything. And I was like, I'm starting this brand. I made a business plan, and I was like, when I fell out of everything at full price, I just had delusions. But definitely, like, I really didn't know. And I think one of the things that's helped Miakoda grow so much is that I've learned so much and I can share that information with people. So I think even if one of my customers is like, oh yeah, I just got this shirt at Gap and I love it. Like, I'm not judging you for that, especially if you are plus size, because the options are so limited. That is why I am so thrilled to have expanded our size range this year.
Yes.
So like, but even so, like, a lot of people, like, shopping ethically and sustainably 100% of the time is expensive. And that's one of the reasons why I love Poshmark. And I see Miakoda pieces up on Poshmark, and I'm like, oh, yes, I love that this is being accessible to other people when they no longer want that piece.
Sure.
And that's why, like, I've had customers say, like, hey, I bought this, I wore it a few times, realized it doesn't fit me, or, like, it doesn't suit my style, or I'm not reaching for it. Can you share that, like, that I want to sell this piece? And, like, so someone who maybe can't afford it can get it cheaper because I've already worn it. I'm like, totally.
That's awesome.
And I know there's tons of brands. Like, I know that Free Label, which is based in Canada, has like a buy-sell Facebook group. I personally can't handle Facebook, but like I think that's great. I always tell people post it to Poshmark because I am happy to tell people to go to Poshmark. But like having those types of Facebook groups where you buy something and like you wear it once and you're like, oh, this is so not for me. You can sell it, or you can trade it, or you can look for, like, you can be like, hey, I got this in a medium and I really need a large. Like, does someone want to trade with me? And I think that's a great way to be more sustainable and ethical. We don't have one of those places, but if you ever buy something from Miakoda and you're like, I wore it, I washed it, doesn't fit me, I will definitely be like, hey, make a post, I'll share it and tell people to contact you, because I think it's a great way to, like, the last thing I want someone to be is like, I bought this, it doesn't fit me, and I now feel bad about myself, or I'm going to throw it out.
Oh, gosh, no. Yeah, most definitely. I remember a situation. I've never had any garment flaw whatsoever in any Miakoda piece. On that, I remember this from earlier. There was one time I felt so bad. The guilt at perhaps returning something makes me so upset, because I'm like, what is this company going to do? What is this company going to do with this piece? Are they going to throw it away? Are they going to put it back in production? Like, what's going on? And I'll share the company because I think she is a wonderful human being. Kira Grace, it is polyester based, is your traditional
I know
knit
the
activewear. Huh?
Yoga wear.
Yes, yoga wear. It is yoga wear. The Miakoda has some plant fibered yoga wear as well. It's in your more traditional sense, the polyester based yoga wear. But I messaged them and I said, hey, this seam is coming out. It was a serge seam too on the butt, so it's not like I could fix it myself. And I messaged them and I said, out of curiosity, I'm wondering what you do with your returned defective garments, because if I were to return this and I would be told that it would go into a landfill or something like that, I would not want to return it. But if you would tell me that it would be it would be repaired and put back into production or donated or something like that, then I would love to exchange this. And she wrote back and she said, I will pay for shipping. Send it to us. We will repair it and send it back to you. And I was like, holy cow. So I got the same piece.
Wow.
And I could see the little spot. It didn't bother me at all. And they just surged over it. I don't know if she did it. I don't know if her factory did it or what. But there was shipping involved. But I got that piece back. It didn't go in the landfill. Yeah. Yep. They repaired the piece for me.
That makes me feel really good because I've supported Kira Grace too. That was one of the... First, I was wearing Lululemon, and then I was like, okay, don't want to wear Lululemon. And my sister is a yoga teacher, and she partnered with Kira Grace a few times, and she was like, I love this company. And she was always wearing Kira Grace. So then I bought some Kira Grace, and now I can't lie, I mostly wear Miakoda.
Oh, of course. Well, why would you not? But yeah,
That's really awesome. No, they're a great brand. Mm-hmm. And they're women-owned, right?
Yes, they are. They are women-owned. They are U.S. made. Yes, ethically crafted. I have looked in their sustainability, and all of it aligns. I've not asked the extra questions, but like she hosted a Saturday morning Zoom yoga throughout the pandemic and had their Kira Grace warriors come on and teach, and she was on herself. So just like you are on your Instagram stories, it's nice when you can see the face of the brand. And I feel like there's so much trust in that too. When you know who owns it,
That's
you
why
know
I do
who
it,
runs
because
it.
I personally love it.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, gosh, yes. No, it's great.
There's totally, like, I don't like supporting, well, even if, like, I like knowing who I'm shopping with. It's like a weird thing now that I'm a small business owner. I'm like, I want to know your name.
Yes.
Like, I don't want to just know, like, the company's name. I want to know your whole deal.
Totally.
But I think sometimes I'm like, am I oversharing so much about my personal life? But I'm like, as a consumer, I enjoy this type of stuff, but I also enjoy watching like what I did today, YouTube videos. So maybe that's just me, but I enjoy it.
Well, I found Miakoda through Rianne Wife Life on YouTube, and that's what I love about her is that she is so overly transparent.
Obsessed with her.
I love her so much, and I saw in the stories you're doing a collab with her in the future, and I'm excited.
I can't leak that, but yes.
But
let me tell you, it's really good.
It might be coming up soon. So we don't know that's happening. That's not happening, guys. We have no idea, but
we have no idea. The fabric is shipping in July. So I already ordered the fabric, and I'm hoping to have it July, August, September, October.
Wow. Oh, that'll be exciting.
I'm really excited about it.
So fun. Oh, she's lovely.
I love her. She's such a wonderful human.
She is. Yes. Wife Life was one of my favorite. I think that's still what she's called on YouTube. I don't quite remember.
I don't know if it's on YouTube or not because I'm just subscribed to her channel, so she comes up. I know she changed her name on Instagram to be Rianne HY.
Yes. Rianne HY. RHIAN, I believe. Yes. Yeah. HY. Yes. She's a lovely human. Underscore?
It's Rianne _HY.
There we go. Thank you for that.
And it's so funny because you always see, like, of course, especially with, like, influencers and internet people, like, they're not going to come across as, like, a horrible person on the internet. So, like, these people, you're always like, oh, my God, I want to be their friend. They're so cool. I love watching them. And, like, having, like, personal dialogue with her, I'm like, oh, my God, you're even better in person. Like, how is that possible?
I love this. Now, in today's age of marketing and selling and social media and influencing, because being an influencer is actually now a job title, having representation is extremely important to, I would hope, a lot of brands. Some brands don't seem to care that much about representation. Miakoda does. And you even went
Very
through,
much do.
oh my gosh, you went through an entire, we're going to call it a little bit of an overhaul last year with model representation in the wake of Black Lives Matter and the brutal murder of George Floyd here in the Midwest. That is the name that we would know the most because he was just north of us in Minneapolis. With Brianna, with every life that has been lost in the past several years to partially police brutality, partially white supremacy. You can pin it on a whole lot of things, but you saw a need for more representation in your models, and you took that bull by the horns, and you went after it with color, with size, with ethnicity, with being in. You have several. I think I've seen several models in a wheelchair as well. What was, so I've just listed a couple of possible catalysts for that. Why was that so important to you to be like, we're doing this and we're doing this all in?
So this is partially a personal thing that like has to do with me and is very me centered in terms of like, when I let's say like I used to shop at J. Crew all the time and I used to buy my jeans from them. And I thought, it's funny because I don't know how to say this in like a congruent way, but okay, I'll start here.
Do it.
I thought Miakoda was having like when I was picking models, I thought I was being very representative and inclusive, not necessarily with size because when Miakoda started, we had small, medium, large. Then everyone asked me for extra small. Let me just tell you, selling an extra small is like selling water to a seal. I don't know. It's like impossible. And then so I was like, if I'm going to do extra small, I'm going to do extra large. And then people were like, when are you going to be size inclusive? So I expanded to extra, extra large. And then I saw humans on the internet, influencers, who I was like, oh my God, I'd love to work with them, but I don't make their size. And I was like, that's a problem. Red flag. And then the person who actually reached out to me, who did my fitting for 4X pieces, Suma Jane Dark, they sent me a message on Instagram and they said, I'd love to wear your clothing, but it doesn't come in my size. And I was like, oh yeah, like that's something I really want to work on. Thank you. Like, I appreciate you. And during COVID, I just had a lot of free time on my hands and a lot of time to think and ruminate and be like, where am I dropping the ball? And I messaged them and was like, hey, if I was to expand my size range, would you help me? I'd pay you. And they were like, yeah, I'm down. So that started that relationship. But back to the J. Crew thing, is I used to shop and buy my jeans at J. Crew back in college, and I've got a butt, I've got thighs, and I've got hips. I'm a relatively small person, so it's very societally accepted. So I can't be like, oh, woe is me. I don't see myself represented. But definitely my Miakoda representation comes out of that woe is me. Because I would buy boyfriend jeans from J. Crew. And let me tell you, they were always tight on me and they were baggy on the model because they had skinny, long legs. They were probably 6 feet tall, size 0. And that's not me.
Sure.
I'm not short. I'm 5'6". But I do not have long, skinny legs. My lower body is where I carry most of my weight. So it always made me feel bad about myself. And I'm like, if this is making me feel bad about myself, like, imagine the people whose bodies aren't represented ever, like, who can't relate to, like, that at all. Like, imagine how they feel. And then I was like, oh my God, I don't want them to feel as bad as I feel, or worse. And, like, so it comes out of, like, not to throw myself under the rug, but like it comes out of a little bit of a selfish place, but I think it's also a place of caring about how other people feel based on my feelings and being able to relate to them. So actually, when Black Lives Matter came to the forefront, I was looking, it was right after I was about to book a photo shoot, and I work with an amazing modeling agency called We Speak Models. They have models in wheelchairs, older models, disabled models, trans models, plus size models, male models, non-binary models, female models, like you name it. I mean, I'm sure they're missing something, but like they've got great representation. And let me just tell you, their models are really good. Like I have never worked, and I've worked with a lot of their models now, and I've never had one that I was like, ooh, wish I didn't hire them. Like they're incredible and so nice, like the nicest. So I was working with We Speak, and I was talking to the owner, Brianna, and she said, hey, one of our models is helping people be more like inclusive and racially diverse, and to really like just like bring that awareness to brands. Her name's Quincy, and she's one of our bike short models. She's wearing the gray shorts.
Okay.
And I worked with her, and I paid her to do kind of like a inclusive, dismantle white supremacy overhaul on Miakoda, and she said to me, yes, you've been using black models this whole time, but do you realize how white your black models look?
Oh.
And I was like, no.
Oops.
Like, hide under a rug. Like, literally, I thought that, like, I always was looking to book Asian and black and Middle Eastern and Indian and blah, 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 blah. Like, I always wanted that, like, but also I was working with other modeling agencies, and I went back and looked at their boards and was like, where did I go wrong? Like, why did I think this model was more beautiful than another model? And I realized that the black-looking black models weren't there. Like, they were all light-skinned, had very European features, like, not, like, exactly what Quincy was calling me out for. And she's incredible. Not only is she an incredible human, she is an amazing model. But she was like, you can book me as a model, but like, I still have white passing features, and like, work with like darker skinned black people with natural hair, like just the whole spectrum. And it really made me think, like, if I'm going to be including more black-looking black models and more diverse models, and at this time I was working on expanding my size range and having more bodies represented. I've always been interested in representing multiple body sizes ever since I had one photo shoot, and I thought I hired 2 models that were 2 different body sizes, and it was like extra small and small. And I was like, I don't think that hit the nail on the head. So I think it's definitely really important as a brand owner to call yourself out, because like, I really thought I was doing a good job, but you know what, I wasn't. And like, I was trying. That's important, but like, it's good to have when people do call you out. Like, one of the things I said is, what do you want to see represented? And really awesome human on Instagram was like, hey, I'm disabled and I never see myself represented, and my dad's disabled. And I was like, how come I never thought, like, I mean, my dad, like, isn't the epitome of ethical consumer. I mean, he's disabled and he spends lots of time shopping on Amazon, but like, we try to, like, he's like, oh, it was vegan. I'm like, good job, Dad. You tried. He's adorable. But he is disabled, and I never thought about how people like him, especially, like, I see how people treat him different because of his disability, and I think that has to do a lot with disability not being represented, and especially not being represented in a way that makes people see them for who they are beyond their disability. Sure. So I think that was, and someone said that to me, and if you looked at her, you would not know that she was disabled. And I worked with her, and then I said, what other disability advocates and disabled influencers do you want to see me work with? And I've worked with people like Wheelchair Rapunzel, who is incredible, and Bree, who is a model for We Speak, and the Disabled Hippie, who is another really awesome human. And you see, like, I think it's important to see people as people across the whole body positivity, body representation, race representation, age representation, ability representation, but also to dismantle ableism, white supremacy, fat phobia, all that stuff. Like, as a brand, you have a lot of responsibility. And even though I'm just one person, I don't want to contribute to any of that as a person or a brand. So that's my ramble on that.
I loved every second. Oh, yes, you are. Oh, my goodness. Well, and like what Quincy was saying too, you know, it's who do you want to see represented? How could you possibly have picked more represented models when your model companies were not actually giving you different faces and different bodies either? So you had that smaller selection. You said you went and looked at their board and you didn't find people of color with non-European features or that don't have white passing features. So it really speaks to what the modeling industry maybe needs to dismantle as well.
And Quincy told me about that too. She said there's so many times, like, you can have like 20 white women identifying on a board, and they'll have like one person of color and be like, that's enough. Like, we can't book that many people of color. Like, can you imagine?
That's just, it's maddening to try to wrap my brain around a place like New York City that would be so diverse, that would have access to so many diverse looking and abled people, that would still be a norm. I think that sometimes I consider my little sheltered Midwest upbringing, you know, but I wouldn't figure that in New York or Chicago. You would figure that with the larger demographics and different varieties of people and race and whatnot you would find in a big city, that wouldn't be the case, but it's still the case everywhere.
The other thing is, I look back on, like, I always was using like plus size or like an extra large or extra large model, because that was what the size that my brand went up to at the time. But I look back at these model boards, and like, people were like, I wish you'd have plus size models. I'm like, she is plus size. And I realized they all have flat stomachs and they all have hourglass bodies.
Got
like,
you.
How is that representative?
Sure. Who was it? Ashley Graham being like the first plus size model, but she considered the first plus size model to make it like big, or on the cover of Sports Illustrated, the swimsuit edition, I think. And she is tall and she is broad and she is the conventionally curvy, hourglassy, like you said, but it's not actually the representation for the plus size population. Most of
like, literally, when I look at Ashley Graham, I'm like, how are you plus size?
No. Now that the mid-sized movement is out, I feel like maybe there's more of an understanding. I think it's more of a social media movement than anything, but the mid-size, the one that's like, I'm not skinny, I'm not tiny, but like, I don't shop in plus size either.
TikTok.
Oh man, TikTok, yeah. It's crazy. It's just crazy, man. But you have considered all of the things once they've been brought to your attention, which I think is so admirable, because clearly other companies have had this brought to their attention and they have done nothing. So I really wish they would, and I would hope that people continue to ask better of the companies that they are shopping with and supporting. But I think it does boil down to it being an industry problem as well. But consumers have
huge industry problem.
Yeah. Consumers and businesses both have a responsibility and the capability to do a lot and at least ask for more. But ultimately, yeah, the industry, little dismantling going on in the industry is good.
You've also brought up a really important point about consumers asking, because I got asked all the time, and it kind of annoyed me, to be completely transparent, is every time I had a photo shoot, even with like an extra large model, like a 2XL, everyone asked me, when are you explaining to plus sizes? And like, I just, first of all, it was expensive. I'm not going to lie. It was very expensive. It's still very expensive for me to do, but it is a zillion% worth it. Like, to any small brand who's like, I understand when I started, I had no budget, and I still work with like a very small budget. And like, I'm always worried about money, and is this going to be worthwhile? And is this going to be cost effective? And it is so worth it. Not only to be that person who makes people feel included in a movement that they want to be included in. Like, there are so many plus size people who want to shop ethically, but also to just like, not only to offer to them, but to expand that, just dismantle the stuff. I don't even know how to put it. But and it's worth it. Like, still to this day, I'm still trying to. I mean, I can't really talk because I just launched 3X and 4X. And I know it goes beyond that. The problem is that, like, I did a poll and I was like, do we carry your size? And one person said no. And I'm like, I need to reach more people who say no in order to be able to expand to 5X, 6X. And I know if I do, I could, but I'm trying to, it's like baby steps. And I know that I am not completely size inclusive, because not every person on the planet can wear my brand. But like, I'm working there, and 4Xs still don't sell that well for me. But 3X is one of our best sellers now.
That's awesome.
And it's only been a few months, and I've only worked with a few plus size influencers. So there's so much more room for growth there. And if I keep getting people saying, you don't make my size, I am going to expand, because as much as, like, especially as a brand owner, when you're trying to do your best and people keep telling you it's not good enough, especially as a sensitive, overly thin-skinned human being. You're like, ah, and you just want to cry in a puddle. But like, you kind of have to be like listening, because if you're not listening, you're not meeting a demand.
Mm-hmm. And you're not serving the folks that would like to be shopping with you either. But then, yes, there's of course the delicate balance of business and being able to stay in production. And if you are making 5X and 6X sizes before you have 5X and 6X clientele, thankfully you have classic pieces that are never going to go out of style. But that's also fabric that is sitting on the shelf, and hopefully not, but potentially sitting there and not going anywhere, or being made into, 1,000 scrunchies, as you do with your fabric samples. I see your cat scrunchie on your wrist, but yeah, businesses have the supply and demand difficulty, but you've done the wonderful thing of asking, do I make your size? Okay, now I will. And it's proof that businesses can strike that balance of, oh, it's expensive, or, oh, well, I don't have any people that shop with me that want that size. Well, that's because you don't offer it. So
that's what really infuriates me, is that these big brands have so much money. I mean, you're throwing out your returns. For me, throwing out a return means like I'm throwing out like a significant, it's like throwing money in the trash. You might as well just make a fire pit with like $20 bills.
Yep.
So like, these brands have so much money, and I think if I can do this with such a small budget, like, it's literally just me on the team. My payroll is me, and like, if I want to pay other people and paying me off, like, sometimes I'll make a note, like, Miakoda owes you this much money, and then when I put myself on the back burner to pay people who I need. And like, if brands who have huge budget that they could be paying their CEOs millions of dollars, paying everyone tons of money, but their garment workers nothing. I mean, whatever. But they can't expand their size range. Like, I just don't get it. And like, they can't do better. Like, I'm just like, you have the budget. Like, this is nothing to you. Like, cut your CEO's budget by $1 million. Pay them like $10 million instead of $15 million, and like, fine. Do a little better as a brand. And like, consumers are asking for it. Like, I see, but like, the problem is that there are so many fast fashion retailers, like Fashion Nova, that do plus size. And that's why I never get mad at seeing the influencers that I want to work with, working with Fashion Nova and other companies like that. I'm like, because they're meeting a demand, but like, they need to meet some other demands, like paying their workers a fair wage. But also you find out that they're also sometimes doing their influencers dirty too. And I'm like, I can't understand how brands with big budgets don't prioritize the people that they work with who literally make their brands.
Sure. Most definitely. That's why you are special, and that's why you do the good things, and that's why we love you.
I love you back.
Now I have one more question for you, my dear, because this is a long podcast. Thanks for sticking with us, guys. But this is all of these such
Thank you, guys. I can ramble forever.
Oh, it's so important though, and this is why I like to have. I had a skincare company on. You would love this, actually, Booney Dune. I will send this to you on the Instagrams. Yes, I had skincare on. I have had you on now. Public policy on, plastic recycling policy. I think it goes beyond just talking about, the food and beverage industry that we usually would. These are things that we don't get to see. These are things that we don't get to hear about. So I think every part of this episode has been so important. I'm so thankful. But if you could go back to, you said you were 21 when you started Miakoda? 22. If you could go back to 22-year-old Julia, what advice would you give her?
Business advice or like, I guess it would be business advice too. I have a couple of things. My first one would be trust your gut, because I have made very expensive mistakes. That's why a lot of people who are starting small brands, I'm always like willing to give them advice. Because I have made very, very expensive mistakes, including trusting someone who did not have my back and paying them more money than I've ever paid myself. They were going to bring my brand in front of a larger audience and up-level it. And they helped me a little bit, but then really like misguided me. And I kept feeling like there was something wrong, and everyone kept telling me there was something wrong here, and like cut the cord. And I just was like, no, they told me that big things are around the corner and like Miakoda's going to make it. And like, I was just so anxious about my company at that time that like, I thought that was like what I had to do. But like, my gut was telling me this isn't good, this isn't good. And I should have listened to that feeling. And I've had feelings many times. Like, one of my things is when Suma wrote to me saying, hey, I'd love to wear your clothing. My gut said, you really need to do something about this. And I trusted my gut and was like, hey, like within like a week maybe, I was like, hey, do you want to help me with this? And when they said yes, I was like, and it benefited me. Yeah. But I think trust your gut is, I mean, to everyone, business owner, not business owner, it is so important to be in tune with yourself and what you need and what, if you're a business owner, your company needs. And then what I would say to Miakoda is probably, well, I wish I could tell 22-year-old Julia a lot of things, like be the brand that, like, just to be more educated and to be the brand that you really want to be and who's going to make you feel good and other people feel good. And I think I was always trying to do that, but not always hitting the mark.
Sure.
So, I mean, I'll probably look back on Miakoda now in like 10 years and be like, wow, I thought I was so inclusive and so this, so that. And I'll be like, wow, I was really missing the mark. But like, you can only do as well as you know in that time. So I think not to be so anxious about Miakoda, I could probably tell that to myself now too. Because as a business owner, like, I've set up some boundaries, but like, if you've ever gotten an email back from me at 2:00 in the morning because I woke up to pee and checked my phone because I'm crazy and sent you back an email at that moment because I was afraid to wait because I felt like I had to respond to immediately, like, just don't be so anxious.
Easier said than done, and that's why we practice yoga. Oh,
exactly.
My goodness. Excellent. Do you have any last words of advice or encouragement for maybe designers in the fashion industry that are looking to be more sustainable or inclusive or anything at all?
It's worth it 110 zillion %. Mm-hmm. Like, I was always so worried about doing so many things because I was afraid that it wouldn't be worth it for my business. And it's been, I mean, the personal gratification that I get out of it, on top of the positive response I get out of it, on top of the actually converting to sales, it's so worth it. And I spoke to brands like Free Label and Sotella before I expanded my size range. Mm-hmm. And they're both ethical and sustainable brands that I personally own from and have spoken to both of the owners, and they are incredible. But I spoke to both of them and they're like, oh, it's worth it. And like, that was a big jump for me, but I think it still took me like another, like maybe 6 months, but it's definitely worth it. And being sustainable is imperative. And not only is it trendy, but it's necessary. And especially with the Gen Z generation being more interested in it, it's, people want it. Yeah. I mean, not only do they need it, even if they don't know they need it, like, they're starting to want it. So it's definitely something to like hop on and to educate yourself about until you're so passionate about it that like, you're like, how could I ever make any other choice?
I love that. Beautiful. Thank you, Gen Z. I feel like they're going to do some really good stuff. I like to think us millennials kind of got the ball rolling, but Gen Z is here to finish what we started. Ooh,
they really are.
Boy, it'll be good. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for spending time coming on the podcast and talking about Miakoda and just the ins and out of the fashion industry as far as ethical manufacturing and sourcing and inclusivity when modeling. It's been such an informative conversation for me, and I feel like I have taken some deep dives into what goes on behind the scenes, and I still learned so many new things and just had things reinforced with your imagery of going to the factories and things like that. So thank you so much. This has been so wonderful.
Yay. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me and sharing with your community. And this has been so fun.
Yay. Now tell our listeners where they can find you on the Instagrams, the Facebooks, all the places.
Okay. So everything is Miakoda New York, Miakoda, New York spelled out. And our website is miakodanewyork.com. Our Instagram is Miakoda New York. If you want more of my personal life, Miakoda Mood Board. And I guess TikTok.
Yes.
Miakoda New York. I'm trying to be a Gen Zer. And
It's hard to be a Gen Zer, especially if you're like somewhat social media resistant, like I feel like we both are, or at least
it's
Facebook
really
resistant.
difficult.
Yeah.
Facebook resistant 100%, but
Yeah.
I feel like Facebook has really like my mom's generation really loves Facebook. But Facebook, Miakoda, New York, I think. I don't know. I just automatically have my Instagram post to Twitter and Facebook. I try to check it every so often so that like if someone sends me a message, I'm on top of it. But like, follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok if you're there.
Likewise.
And definitely our website.
And we will be tagging everything in the show notes and in the episode description. So, guys, you can go to the description and click all of the links depending on what site you on. If you use Facebook, the Facebook will be linked. So we will hopefully hear more of you soon. I'm excited for my joggers to come, or not the joggers. I have the joggers. Excited for my bike shorts, and I'm excited for all the releases and the collabs coming up. So we will keep track of you and keep our listeners updated on all the exciting things. So thank you so much. Thank you, listeners. And I hope you all tune in next time.